This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this IIEA webinar discussing the topic of the effectiveness of EU military missions and operations. I am Major General Maureen O'Brien, retired of the Irish Defence Forces, and I will be your moderator today. We are absolutely delighted to be joined by Lieutenant General Michael van der Laan, Director General of the EU Military Staff, who has generously taken time out of his schedule to speak to us today. Lieutenant General van der Laan will speak for about 10 to 15 minutes or so, and we will go directly after that to questions and answers with our audience. You will be able to join the discussions using the Q&A function on Zoom, which you should see on your screen. Please feel free to send your questions in throughout the session as they occur to you, and we will come then to Lieutenant General van der Laan when he's finished his presentation. When you're asking the questions, please identify yourselves and your affiliation. A reminder that today's presentation and the Q&A are both on the record. Please feel free to join the discussion on Twitter using the handle @IIEA. I will now formally introduce General van der Laan and hand over to him. General van der Laan is the Director General of the EU Military Staff, and as such is the European External Action Service's Senior Military Advisor and the principal source of its military expertise. He directs the EU Military Staff, providing military advice and experience to EU institutions. In a dual-hatted capacity, he also serves as the Director of the Military Planning and Conduct Capability, the MPCC. As the Director General of the EUMS, he oversees early warning, situational assessment and strategic planning for EU military missions, ensuring the effective operational planning and conduct of non-executive missions throughout the MPCC. He further supports crisis management capability development and maintains close coordination with the European Defence Agency, the EDA. I would now like to hand over to General van der Laan. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maureen. And I think every time you pronounce my name, it's improving. So my first name is Michiel, but this is very different. Michiel is very different for especially Irish, I learned, because as you know, I have a military assistant coming from Ireland, and after 2 years, he still does not manage. But again, I'm delighted to be with you and everybody on the screen, and I'm really excited to address this audience. Especially delighted to take part in the event where you will act as a moderator. As you know, Maureen, to the audience, Maureen is a highly distinguished Irish Defence Forces officer whose 42-year military career culminated in her holding the appointment of Deputy Military Advisor to the UN Under-Secretary General of Peace and Operations. My remarks today will focus on a topic that is central to our discussions in Brussels at present: the effectiveness of EU CSDP military missions and operations. In an era of increasing instability, strategic competition, and multi-phased crisis, the European Union's role as a security provider and actor is under sharper scrutiny than ever. I will explore during my presentation 3 connected themes. First, the current state of the EU military mission operations under the Common Security and Defence Policy. Second, the extent to which these missions are effective in delivering for member states and supporting partner nations. And thirdly, the key challenges we face and the important role of the EU Rapid Deployment Capacity, the RDC, in addressing them. As mentioned, I will address you in my capacity as Director General and Director of the MPCC. And however, before we begin, I would like to offer a couple of questions for you to reflect upon regarding Ireland's approach to security and defence. Questions that I hope will help to stimulate the discussion following my remarks. And my first remark would be a question: is Ireland effectively contributing to peace and security in Europe? or is it perceived by others as defense freeloader? And more specific, I'm aiming at how much money do you spend for defense? And secondly, how many people, how many Irish soldiers are involved in the 9 EU military mission operations? And I can be wrong, but I think 0. Secondly, Ireland is currently debating the so-called triple lock mechanism. So the question is, should decisions on the deployment of Irish troops overseas not rest solely with Ireland, rather than be influenced by the veto power of Permanent 5 of the UN Security Council? More specific, does Russia have a say on your deployments? So I know Maureen will certainly have valuable perspectives to share with us. We can return to these questions and any others that you may wish during our discussion after the address. Let me start with the current state of the EU military mission operations. The EU deploys civilian and military missions abroad to support crisis management, stabilization, capacity building, and, where required, the use of military force. There are 21 ongoing mission operations, 12 civilian, 8 military, and 1 joint military-civilian initiative. 2 of the most recent additions are the military assistance mission in Ukraine, or for Ukraine, on which I serve as a mission commander, and Operation Aspidis in the Red Sea. These are examples of the EU exercising a meaningful military dimension in its security policy, increasingly beyond the largely civilian posture of the previous decades. The evidence of effectiveness. When assessing effectiveness, I will consider 3 factors: relevance, operational performance, and strategic impact. On relevance, the CSDP is a tool, not an end in itself. It achieves results only when guided by a shared political vision amongst the 27 member states and aligned with the real needs of the host nations. Where that alignment exists, missions remain both valued and impactful. Second, operational performance. The operational performance provides real evidence of success. In Mozambique, our mission has strengthened partner forces facing violent extremism. In the Mediterranean and Red Sea, EU naval operations have safeguarded maritime security and freedom of navigation. And through the EU military assistance mission to Ukraine, over 85,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been trained, a contribution that directly reinforces European security. However, we must also acknowledge limitations. For example, the suspension of operational training in the Central African Republic has reduced our relevance there. Many host nations require not just advice, but also lethal assistance. The EU recently closed both the training mission in Mali and the military partner mission in Niger. In Mali, political relations deteriorated as Mali increasingly aligned itself with alternative security providers, such as the Russian-affiliated Wagner Group. Similarly, in Niger, the EU terminated its mission, citing the grave political situation following the coup and the authorities' decision to revoke key defense agreements with the EU. These developments fundamentally undermine the EU's presence in the Sahel. However, while the EU is often most comfortable acting in the black and white, credible global influence sometimes requires operating in the so-called gray zone, where others, including Russia and China, already compete aggressively. Third, the strategic impact. The strategic impact remains the greatest challenge. Missions have raised the EU's profile as a security actor and strengthened cooperation among member states. Yet, durable strategic effect requires a much stronger link between political intent and all instruments of EU power, meaning diplomatic, economic, financial, and military. This is why the EU now is pursuing a more coherent, integrated approach to achieve this strategic impact. Then, turning to the EU rapid deployment capacity. The key challenges we have: capacity and capability shortfalls across the Union, particularly in logistics, mobility, strategic transport, and dual use of infrastructure, continue to restrict our capacity to deploy rapidly. Furthermore, there is often a persistent mismatch between our ambition and our willingness to resource that ambition. As I always mention this, there's always a lot of political wish, not that much political will, because the will comes with the bill. We constrain ourselves in the field to advising and training roles, even when the situation demands more. Our credibility will be judged by our actions, and political action comes with a bill. It's within this context that the EU rapid deployment capacity has emerged as a pivotal instrument. The RDC is designed as a force for up to 5,000 troops across land, air, maritime, space, and cyber domains, able to deploy swiftly into crisis settings under EU political decision-making and political decision direction. Its structure is anchored in the Military Planning and Conduct Capability, the MPCC, ensuring clear and continuous command arrangements. Meanwhile, intensive training and live exercise in Spain, Germany, and Hungary are already developing the interoperability and readiness required for meaningful action. By the way, I saw Irish soldiers in that live action in Hungary, so that was the good news. By enabling the EU to act with speed and flexibility, the RDC has the potential to significantly enhance our operational performance and reinforce Europe's relevance as a security provider. Yet its success is not guaranteed. It will depend on political decisions taken on time, the provision of key enablers, and member states' commitment and resources. To conclude my remarks, the EU CSDP mission operations have evolved significantly. They remain relevant to the challenge we face. They have delivered tangible operational results, and they have strengthened Europeans' role in crisis management. However, their strategic effectiveness remains a work in progress. The RDC represents a turning point, a shift from aspiration to the possibility of real military responsiveness, enhanced capacity, and stronger strategic credibility. Whether this moment becomes a milestone in European defense will depend entirely on political will and collective responsibility. If Europe wants peace, Europe must be prepared to defend it. Maureen, thank you for your attention and to the whole team, and I look forward to the question and especially to the discussion.
This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.